Hi, and welcome to this edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health. Our mission here at Fresh Hope for Mental Health is to empower you to live well in spite of your mental health challenge by sharing insights through interviews, practical tools for living well, encouragement, and courage for overcoming all from a Christian perspective. And now, here's your host, Pastor Brad Hoefs.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to Fresh Hope for Mental Health. I'm Brad Hoefs, your host. Our purpose here on Fresh Hope for Mental Health is to empower you to live a faith-filled, rich, and full life in spite of having a mental health diagnosis. And I am so thrilled to have with me today a young lady from Nashville, Tennessee, and I ran across a blog that she wrote, and some of you might have run across it too. It's called, I Love Jesus, but I Want to Die, What You Need to Know About Suicide. Well, the author of that is Sarah Robinson, and Sarah's with me on the line today, and she has a blog called Beautiful Between, beautifulbetween.com. So Sarah, welcome to Fresh Hope for Mental Health.
Thanks so much, Brad. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to meet you. We just spoke for a few minutes here before I turned on the record button. So tell me about yourself. Tell me who you are. What brought you to writing this blog? Tell me a little bit about your manifesto, your purpose for life, and things like that.
Awesome. Well, I am 32, living in Nashville with my creative photographer husband. Living a really great life here, and also living with chronic mental illness. I probably, as long as I can remember, I've told people, I don't remember a time before feeling depressed. I don't remember a time before wanting to die or disappear, even as a child. And, there's a combination of reasons for that. Mental illness has been an ongoing theme in my family, coupled with some early trauma. And then I just kind of have that creative, melancholy type of personality. If you're familiar with the Enneagram, I'm a 4. So definitely lean towards it just a little bit personality-wise. So I sort of always had that trifecta of risks, just to make that something that became really a part of my life. In my teen years, I became a Christian. I'd kind of been raised thinking that I was a Christian, but had no real understanding of Jesus or grace or love. So I got invited to this youth group, and there was no altar call or anything, but I remember just having this really powerful sense of the love and the presence of God. And I remember just sitting on the floor and crying my eyes out. And I never cried. I was just so numb all the time. And so I was like, I don't know what this is, but I want it.
Sure.
So I just kind of went full force into the church world, but quickly discovered that loving Jesus doesn't fix everything. It doesn't make you better. And while there were so many things that were incredible about my church, such community and closeness and love and serving the community, there were also some elements that were really toxic theologically, including out of a place of being very charismatic and sort of leaning into the prosperity gospel, this sense that if you prayed and God didn't answer, you didn't have enough faith, or you had some hidden sin. If you talked about anything in a negative way, if I were to say, I'm depressed, I'm sad, I hate my life, and I want to die, then I was quote unquote cursing myself with my words. So I learned very early on that it was not okay to be not okay. And I learned that I had to hide what I was feeling, and that there was something very wrong with me. And so I believed for a long time that, like, the whole idea of like God loving everyone, well, that was only because God is love, so he doesn't really have a choice. But he probably doesn't like really like me and doesn't really like actually love me for who I am.
Yeah. You needed to
Eventually,
change who you were in order for that to happen, huh?
Totally. And eventually over the years, I wound up being exposed to more of the grace of God and the love of God, and eventually had someone who I really loved and respected, and I later wound up working with in ministry, look me in the eyes and say, honey, you deal with depression. And that's what this cloud is that you're living under, and you need to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And that began about a 3-year process of slowly sort of dipping my toes into getting help. I had done like all of the Christian things you're supposed to do.
Sure.
I went to like inner healing things for people who are like familiar with that. If you're not, that's where you go and you pray with somebody through like every negative thing that's ever happened in your life. And you like pray things like, I break this off. But when it's really a chemical issue or due to trauma you've experienced, that doesn't just like erase it. Like God's powerful and able to heal and all that, but a lot of times I think that's the exception and not the rule.
Right. And the Lord heals in numerous ways.
So many ways.
And sometimes it's natural, the way he created our bodies. Sometimes it's through medicine. And the very people that lead you through these processes, if they had a broken leg, most likely would go to the emergency room and have it set.
Exactly. Yeah, but there's this dichotomy in a lot of areas of the church still. It's not as prevalent as it used to be, but that our mind and our souls are separate from our body. And in reality, our mind, is a part of us. It's a part of our body. It's a part of our brain. And so
I look at it this way, that our brain is the organ. It's no more spiritual than the large intestine and other parts of our bodies. And it gets buried with you. It doesn't go off to heaven separate of the body and or cremate it with you. It stays with the body because it's part of the body. And it's just as affected by sin and the brokenness that we live in, not talking about actual sin, but just the original sin, the brokenness. So the brain or the mind is what the brain does. And the mind can't be whole.
That's a great perspective.
Yeah, if the dysfunction of the brain is happening, well, heck, God heals through medicine in other ways. Why wouldn't he use that,
Yeah, just like digestion is what your intestines and your stomach do.
Yep, your eyes help you see, and if they're not working, you're not going to see right.
Totally.
Yep.
Totally. So I started to go kind of through this process of beginning to get help. And even though I had over the years, tried to do inner healing stuff, and I tried to go to Christian counselors because that was kind of acceptable.
Sure.
But I had some really, really awful experiences. And it took probably about 5 years before I found one good therapist. And I believe she was the 5th that I tried to work with.
That's a long time, isn't it?
It is. But once I found her, and around the same time sort of overcame the shame and the stigma in the church of being on medication, I started to take meds because I was just in a really dark place. I was really desperate. I had learned enough about grace and the love of God that I didn't hate myself anymore. And so dealing with mental illness is a lot different when you see yourself as valuable and you see yourself as worth whatever it takes to get better.
Well, and when you separate the disease from yourself.
Yes.
And realize that I'm somebody separate of this.
Yeah.
And this thing that I have is something I have like I'd have cancer or anything
Exactly.
else,
Totally.
Yes. Well, so when did you start writing? When did you start being brave enough to tell your story?
Well, I've always been a writer. I've never been able to get away from it. It's
You've
one of those
tried?
things. Yeah, I just can't escape it. It's just always a part of my life. I think I have like 50 or 60 journals I've filled up
Oh,
in
wow.
like over the years. So,
Wow.
yeah, it's something that I almost need. I started my blog in about 3.5 years ago, I
Mm.
think. And it's called Beautiful Between because I originally, at that time I was still single. I was waiting on some things. I was struggling with mental health. I just moved to a new city all by myself.
Mm.
And I was struggling with this concept that we live in the not yet.
Yes, we
And
do.
we have these things we want and we look forward to, whether they're things of faith or eternity, or whether they're like you're infertile and struggling to
Mm-hmm.
conceive and dealing with this horrible grief every month as you realize again that you're not pregnant, or
Mm-hmm.
you grew up in purity culture and were taught that if you were good, God would bring you a spouse by the time you were like 20, and now
Yeah.
you're 35 and you've never dated,
Yeah.
and you're waiting for God to move in your life,
Yep.
or you're just waiting for somebody to notice you, or for the career or the job or
Mm-hmm.
the relationship with the family member to work out. We're always living in this not yet.
Mm-hmm.
And yet,
I learned at the seminary that theologically there's many things that are declared in the Bible that, for instance, you're whole, you're this, you're that's here, now, and not yet.
yeah.
So I love your line, beautiful between living fully in the now and the not yet.
Hmm.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
That's a great byline.
Thanks.
It's very deep. Many people, it will be many times for the first time they think about the fact that, yeah, I do live in the not yet. Kind of at the intersection of hope and hopelessness at the same time.
Totally. And the thing is, what I've learned, honestly, through walking through a lot of trauma and mental health issues and just life challenges, is that life can be really hard and really
Mm-hmm.
messy and really broken, and
Yes.
it's no less beautiful.
Right.
And I can be in the middle of a depressive episode and I can still fight to see the light and
Yep.
see what's good. And I don't believe you can choose joy. I think that's a misnomer, and I think it's a toxic teaching.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe you can cultivate it no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that's sort of where I started writing from. And
Mm-hmm.
over time, I just kind of felt like I was supposed to start sharing things. Probably my first really vulnerable article was about how when I was 20 years old and I was in college, I was in a really dark season and I was struggling with self-harm. And I didn't know what to do. And I was keeping it a secret. And I was a leader in my church and I was on worship leader and a youth leader and all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And I showed up on an older couple from my church. I showed up on their doorstep late one night and told them what was going on because they were the only place I felt like I could go that was safe.
Mm-hmm.
And the husband looked at me and said, "I'm not disappointed in you." And that just, wrecked me. I was like, what? Like, I don't even know how that's possible. So I shared that story and how that's been something that like really changed me in a lot of ways, and so I try to extend that to other people and make sure people know, like, I'm not disappointed in you when you tell me that you self-harmed or you messed up
Sure.
or whatever. And God's not disappointed in you either.
Yep.
You can't surprise him, so you can't disappoint him.
Exactly. And if you're listening to this podcast and you're relating to what Sarah's saying, you need to hear that again. God's not disappointed in you.
He's not. It's impossible to disappoint God. If
Mm-hmm.
God is who we say he is and who we say we believe he is, he knows. He already knows. He
Mm-hmm.
knew before he made you. He knew
Mm-hmm.
before Jesus died. He knew all of it. And so...
And he loves us in spite of all of our
Yeah.
messes and all of our,
Yeah.
It's love that changes us. It's his unconditional grace.
It is.
Now, I want to go back to something you said, because I find it intriguing, that choose joy. That's really a misnomer, or a toxic kind of thing. I always tell people you can choose hope, and you choose it with the spiritual part of yourself or the faith part of yourself. In other words, that is a reality that whether I feel it or not, I hold to it. And then on the other hand, I have to express my feelings of hopelessness. I have to get them out. So just by choosing something spiritually does not make you hopeful.
Totally.
Because I think that we Christians are, and I have a friend who's very ill. He's at death's door right now, and everybody's praying for a miracle, which I have no problem with. God can perform any miracle. But I find a lot of Christians are putting a Band-Aid over the pain his wife is feeling. You know what I'm saying? Like, God is bigger, blah, blah, blah. And it's like she needs to express her concerns right now.
Yeah.
And not have somebody tell her how to think or what scripture to claim over it, and then this will fix it. And we do that with a lot of things in the Christian world, where we don't let people feel their feelings. And what I like is you're saying, feel your feelings. You got to deal with it.
Yeah.
You have to process
have to deal with it. And I think the problem is that, that teaching that, like, oh, choose joy. I was told, like, if you are saved, if you know Jesus died for you, then you should always be joyful.
Yeah.
But the reality is that we can't choose our emotions.
Nope.
We can choose to bottle them. We can choose to bury them. We can choose to numb them. But we cannot choose what we feel. Like, I can no more sit here and think, I want to feel sad, than I can sit here and think, I want to feel happy.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's just...
Especially if you understand that scientifically your emotions and feelings come from brain chemistry.
Yeah.
Not necessarily choices that we make. Now, some of that's affected by what we deeply believe in our hearts. Our feelings come from there when we interpret life, but it's more complicated than just simply saying, choose this. If you've got a broken leg, choose to have it healed, choose to walk.
Right. Now, what you can do with that broken leg is you can choose to do the things that facilitate healing. You can choose to go to bed early and get good rest.
Yep.
You can choose not to keep straining it. You can choose to take your medicine. And all of those things cultivate healing, just like when I use my gratitude practice, when I go out and walk, when it's sunny, when I intentionally beat back the dark thoughts, I'm cultivating joy in all of those situations. Right. I'm making choices that may lead to joy and may lead to happiness and lead to those emotions. But what most Christians would tell you is like, oh, joy is not an emotion. That's actually not biblical at all. Yeah. If you look up the word for joy in the Bible, it's the exact same word as is used for happiness and gladness. Like, it's about it's an emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And even that verse that says the joy of the Lord is your strength,
Mm-hmm.
can possibly, and maybe even better, be translated, God's happiness is your refuge.
Mm-hmm.
And in context, it's about people who were so worried that they had gone so far from God, and they were afraid of what was going to happen to them. They were weeping and mourning because they realized they'd rejected God and broken all of his rules, and he must be mad at them.
Mm-hmm.
But the priests and the people who understood the word of God said, hey, don't cry. God's happiness, God's joy that he takes in you, God's delight in you is your refuge. You don't have to be afraid, because God's covering you with his own love for you.
Absolutely. And I could tell you, as a grandparent, that's how I feel about my grandchildren.
Yeah.
But as a parent, I never felt that way. As a parent, I felt like my responsibility was to mold them and shape them. And, so I was always concerned about the rough edges. And as a grandparent,
Sure.
I don't care. I just love you.
I don't care about your rough edges.
You
I
got
can
rough
send you
edges.
back too.
Your mom had them too, and she still got them, or your dad. And where you just take delight in somebody, and your grandkids feel that. And so I can't imagine, if I feel that as an earthly person, grandfather, how God must feel about us. It blows me away, and there's great joy to be found in that, great happiness, great contentment.
There is.
Tell me about the joyful course that you have on your blog.
Yeah, so that's just it's a pretty small course, just a simple little series of exercises that kind of teach you how to cultivate joy. So it goes through some Bible verses to explain, like, this is what joy is and what it isn't.
Yeah.
It kind of demystifies some of those things we just talked about, like that people will tell you just choose joy, but you might feel really guilty because you'll like think really hard, like, I'm going to choose joy, and you still feel just as depressed or
because the feelings
broken.
didn't go away.
Yeah. So it's a 5-day course that helps you truly understand joy, where it really comes from, that it is a response to goodness. It's an experiential response, how we get it, and how we can hold on to it in the really hard seasons when it feels like everything's hitting the fan and we feel like we just can't get our head above water, when we feel like we're just crushed into the ground.
Yeah.
How do we find joy then?
Yeah.
What are the really simple things that I can do even when I barely feel like I can get out of bed to cultivate joy in my life?
Yep. Yeah. Because the error on the other side of things are that many times those of us who have a mental health challenge, we just kind of sit around and wait for the medicine to magically work.
Yeah.
Just like in some circles of Christianity, there, you hold on to God and trust him and pray harder and pray more, you get your miracle. Well, the other end of that, or opposite side of that, so to speak, is I'm just going to sit here and wait for the medicine to magically change how I think and what I do.
Yeah, and that doesn't work either.
No, we have to work with our medicine.
What I found is that medicine was incredible to stabilize me, to do the hard work.
Absolutely.
And that included therapy, that included changing my diet significantly. I always have eaten pretty healthy, but learning, certain foods that help and certain foods that hurt. Yep. I don't eat sugar anymore because it gives me panic attacks.
I know. I'm so addicted to it.
Yeah.
I went off last weekend and did my own sugar addiction, and it's awful what it does to you.
It is awful. The good news is that, at least for me and for a lot of people, unprocessed sweeteners like honey and real maple syrup, not like Mrs. Butterworth's, but like real maple syrup, don't spike your blood sugar in the same way. So I'll do that in limited
Mm-hmm.
quantities. But yeah, if I eat like a couple pieces of candy, I will start to have heart palpitations.
Mm-hmm.
But I never would have known that if I hadn't
Yep.
gotten on medications that could stabilize me enough where
Right.
I could exercise. I had the energy to figure out what's good for me to eat and
Right.
what's not. I
And you could have
could,
ended up trying to medicate the anxiety with more sugar and
yeah,
only to make it worse.
yeah, totally, totally. And carbs and all of
Yep.
that.
Yep.
So that's kind of my perspective on medication. I'm in the process actually of reducing my medications now. I've been on them for a couple years and I'm pretty stable. So working with a doctor to see, hey, is this something I need to be on long term? If so, great. I will do that for the rest of my life. But if not, and it was for a season and maybe for another season in the future,
Right.
then, obviously I want my body to take care of itself and learn to make the correct brain chemistry if it can. But I never would have gotten to this point if I didn't get on medications and go to therapy.
Yep.
And then I know that sometimes Christians don't like to hear that those are the two big things. But those things have so much impacted my relationship with God,
Sure they have. And
dealing with my perspectives of myself, and even if you do that in a non-Christian context, that will so inform your relationship with God,
yep.
because then you'll know the truth about who you are and be able to hear God's voice better and receive
Mm-hmm.
it better
Yep.
when he says kind things to you.
Right. And you're a whole, and the reason for that is you're a whole person.
Yes,
Your faith is part of everything.
it is.
Yep. Well, we are out of time, and I hope you'll talk to me again, because I suspect our listeners are going to let us know that they really appreciated hearing from you. And those of you who are listening, I want to come back to, you want to go to beautifulbetween.com, and she's got lots of intriguing blog posts, and all kinds of things. This joyful course is there. I almost said joyful curse. Joyful course is there. Her manifesto and all kinds of stuff. And Sarah, you were talking about resources that you would put up for our listeners, I believe, before. So you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I have a few resources that I'd love to share with you guys. If you go to beautifulbetween.com/fresh hope, then I will have a few things there for you. I'll have a link to my manifesto, which is a short ebook that just kind of encourages you, hey, it's okay to feel your feelings. It's okay that it's hard. And you can also live a really beautiful life in the in-between. I will have my guide from the article we chatted about earlier, the suicide article. And it's a really simple 2-page guide on how to talk to people who are struggling with severe depression and anxiety and even suicidal thoughts. And if you know someone who's struggling and you're not sure how to talk to them, that's really great. Also, a lot of my readers have found that as those who are struggling, they've printed it out and given it to their loved ones to say, here's how to talk to me. Here's what I need. And then I also am creating a self-care kit guide. So a really simple guide on how to create a self-care kit that when you have bad days is already in place, and a bunch of ideas of things that you can use to help you get through your low moments.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. So if they just go to beautifulbetween.com/fresh hope.
/fresh hope. You got it.
You bet. And do check out her website. And I suspect we'll be hearing more from Sarah in the future, as well as look for a book from her sometime down the road, because I suspect that that too is part of what the Lord has in store for her. So you want to look for author Sarah Robinson in the future. If there's a book or anything that Sarah's doing, we're going to let you know about it, because she's certainly somebody that we share the same perspectives with. And so would you mind closing us out, Sarah, by just speaking to the person who's listening and who might be struggling today?
If you're struggling, and if you feel like you're in a dark place and you feel like you can't see the light, I want you to remember that the Bible tells us that even if we make our beds in the pit of hell, that God will be with us there. That
Yep.
Hope is an anchor for our souls, and an anchor doesn't stop the waves from crashing. It doesn't stop the storms, but it keeps a ship from being pushed along until it's smashed against the rocks and destroyed. So in the midst of your dark season, I want you to know it's okay that it's hard. It's okay that you're hurting. It's okay that you don't know what to do. And also, you are so not alone, and you are loved, and dark days do not last forever. And I want you to know that no matter what the lies tell you, you are absolutely worth whatever it takes to get whole. You deserve it. You are loved by God. He wants you whole. And even if that means you learn to kind of walk with a limp and live with your mental illness as a chronic illness, you can still have a really, really good and rich and joyful life, even in the midst of the mess.
Amen. Amen. Well, would you mind praying?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Lord, thank you so much for every listener who is going to hear this podcast. I thank you for the fact that they're taking a few moments to seek hope and to seek life and to choose life and to choose love and to choose to seek those things. I pray that you would bring peace where there's anxiety, where it feels like their insides are just rattling. I pray that you would soothe them and help them to calm down and feel your love. Where it feels like there's a weight on their chest, or their skin is burning, or their head's on fire, I pray that you just bring a sense of peace and calm to their bodies. I pray that you would bring hope. Yes. That is beyond anything that they can manufacture themselves or choose. And I pray that you would speak life, and that you would be the loudest voice in their ears, the loudest voice they hear, and that they'd begin to believe the true and the kind and the beautiful and the good things that you say about them. I pray you'd make a way where it seems like there's no way, that you'd connect people with the treatments and the services and the professionals and the community and the friends that they need. And that you would fill their lives with good things, and that their lives would be a testimony of redemption and restoration and resurrection. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Sarah, for being with us today. I appreciate your time and your insights so much, and I pray that the Lord just opens the doors for wonderful things to happen so that your message might be shared even more so. For those who are hurting and live, for all of us who are living in between and not yet. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Brad.
You bet. You bet. Well, my friend, we want to thank you for listening to this edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health. I hope and pray that it's been helpful to you. I suspect it has. We really love to hear from you. So email us your comments, your questions, or insights, and we'll answer your questions on the program or share comments with folks on our podcast. You can email me at pastorbrad@freshhope.us. That's pastorbrad@freshhope.us. We have lots of other podcasts available, so just check them out at Fresh Hope for Mental Health, or you can find us on iTunes. I hope you'll share with your friends and tell them about this podcast program. Now, until next time, may the Lord fill you with his hope, fresh and new daily. I'm Brad Hoefs, and until next time, God bless you.
You've been listening to Fresh Hope for Mental Health. If you have an opportunity, please review, share, and subscribe to the Fresh Hope for Mental Health podcast on iTunes or on the service that you use. We encourage you to share our podcast on social media with your friends and family. Previous podcasts of Fresh Hope for Mental Health can be found at freshhopeformentalhealth.com, iHeartRadio, Stitcher Radio, and iTunes. The Fresh Hope for Mental Health podcast is part of Fresh Hope. Fresh Hope is an international network of Christian mental health peer support groups which empower people to live well in spite of having a mental health diagnosis. For more information about Fresh Hope, go to freshhope.us. Fresh Hope is one of the leading networks of faith-based peer support groups internationally. Our host, Brad Hoefs, is founder and president of Fresh Hope. He is a pastor who is living well in spite of having bipolar disorder. Brad is the author of the book Fresh Hope for Living Well, which is available at Amazon.com. Brad is also a speaker, blogger, hope coach, and mental health advocate. You can find more out about Brad by going to bradhoefs.com. Hoefs is spelled Hoefs. If you or someone you know is interested in attending a Fresh Hope group meeting, go to freshhope.us and click on Find a Group. Not only do we have local groups, but we also offer Fresh Hope groups online also. If you're interested in starting a Fresh Hope group in your community, email us at info@freshhope.us.